Welcome to DCF Investigations. Imagine, if you will, the early hours of a summer morning in the Southern Hemisphere. The date is December 1st, 1948. The location is Somerton Beach, a quiet, scenic stretch of coastline in Adelaide, South Australia. The air is warm, humid, and heavy with the scent of salt and seaweed. The world is still recovering from the ravages of the Second World War, and while peace has theoretically returned, the shadows of espionage and Cold War paranoia are beginning to lengthen across the globe. It is here, against the seawall, that a local jeweler named John Lyons looks down during his morning walk and sees something that will spark one of the most enduring, baffling, and complex mysteries in the history of crime. He sees a man. The man is lying back with his head resting against the concrete wall, legs crossed at the ankles, as if he were simply sleeping off a night of revelry or taking a moment to admire the sunrise. But there is a stillness to him that is unnatural. The flies are gathering, and the man does not twitch. When the authorities arrive, they find a corpse that offers no answers, only an endless series of questions that will haunt investigators for over 7 decades. This is the story of the Somerton Man, a case that combines the intrigue of a spy thriller, the tragedy of unrequited love, and the cold precision of forensic science. Tonight, we are going to walk through every single grain of sand in this hourglass of mystery. We will examine the clothes, the code, the poison, the secret pocket, and the recent explosive DNA revelations that have turned this case upside down. To truly understand the gravity of this discovery, we must first immerse ourselves in the atmosphere of Adelaide in 1948. This was a conservative, tight-knit city, often called the City of Churches. It was a place where everyone knew everyone, and strangers were noticed immediately. The war had brought an influx of European migrants, and with them came new cultures, but also new suspicions. The Woomera Test Range, a top-secret missile testing facility, was being established nearby, making Adelaide a hotbed for intelligence agencies. The fear of Soviet spies was not just a story in the newspapers. It was a palpable tension in the air. When the police arrived at Somerton Beach at 6:45 a.m., they found the body of a man who appeared to be around 40 to 45 years old. He was in peak physical condition. He was 5 feet 11 inches tall, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. His hands were smooth, showing no signs of manual labor. Yet his calves were well developed and high, and his toes were wedged in a peculiar way, leading some to later speculate that he might have been a ballet dancer or someone who wore pointed shoes for work. But it was his attire that immediately struck the officers as odd. It was a hot summer morning, yet this man was dressed for a winter in Melbourne or London. He wore a white shirt, a red and blue tie, brown trousers, a knitted pullover, and a fashionable double-breasted gray-brown coat. All of his clothing was of high quality, but there was one detail that sent a chill down the spine of the investigators. All the labels had been meticulously cut away. There were no name tags, no maker's marks, nothing that could identify where the clothes were bought or who owned them. In his pockets, police found a half-used packet of juicy fruit gum, an aluminum Army-issue comb, a packet of Army Club cigarettes containing 7 cigarettes of a different, more expensive brand called Kenzitas, and a quarter-full box of Bryant and May matches. There was no wallet, no cash, no identification card. It was as if this man had simply materialized out of thin air, stripped of his identity, The body was taken to the Royal Adelaide Hospital. The autopsy was performed by Dr. John Dwyer, a highly respected pathologist. His findings only deepened the mystery. The man's pupils were smaller than normal, a condition known as meiosis. There was blood in his stomach, mixed with the remains of a pasty, partially digested meal. Likely a pasty he had eaten 3 to 4 hours before death. His spleen was 3 times the normal size, firm and distinct. His liver was congested with blood. Dr. Dwyer concluded that the death was not natural. The congestion in the organs suggested a powerful poison, one that could stop the heart and interfere with the body's regulatory systems. The doctors suspected digitalis, or strophanthin, glycosides that were commonly used for heart conditions, but could be lethal in high doses. The terrifying aspect of these poisons, particularly in 1948, was that they decomposed rapidly in the body, leaving almost no trace for toxicologists to find. The man had been poisoned, but the poison itself had vanished, leaving only the wreckage of his internal organs as proof. The investigation stalled almost immediately. Fingerprints were taken and circulated throughout Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. No matches were found. The dental records were distinct. The man was missing 18 teeth, including both laterals next to his front teeth. But no dentist came forward to claim him as a patient. The media frenzy began. Papers dubbed him the Somerton Man. Theories ran wild. Was he a spurned lover? A black marketeer? A foreign agent liquidated by his own government? Weeks turned into a month. The body lay in the morgue, embalmed, waiting for a name. Then, on January 14, 1949, a breakthrough occurred. Staff at the Adelaide railway station found a brown suitcase in the cloakroom. It had been checked in on November 30th, the day before the body was found. The ticket number linked it to the time the Somerton Man was believed to have been in the area. When police opened the suitcase, they felt they were finally staring into the life of the unknown man. Inside, they found a red-checked dressing gown, a pair of red felt slippers, 4 pairs of underpants, pajamas, shaving gear, and a screwdriver. They also found a table knife that had been filed down to a sharp point, an instrument often used by locksmiths or leatherworkers. But 2 items stood out as particularly specific. One was a stenciling brush, the kind used by merchant seamen to mark cargo. The other was a spool of orange wax thread, a brand called Barber, which was not sold in Australia. This thread was identical to a piece of thread used to repair the lining of the Somerton Man's coat pocket. The suitcase also contained clothes with the name Keane written on them. Sometimes it was spelled Keane, other times just Kean. Police were ecstatic. They believed they had their man. They searched missing person records for a T. Keane. They found nothing. It soon became apparent that the name tags had been left on purpose, while the others were removed, perhaps as a red herring, or perhaps because the clothes were second-hand. The suitcase proved the man had traveled, possibly from Melbourne, and that he had arrived by train, showered at the adjacent city baths, and then bought a ticket to Henley Beach, which he never used. Instead, he had taken a bus to Somerton. Why Somerton? Why that beach? Months passed. The trail went cold again. In April 1949, a professor of physiology named Sir Cedric Stanton Hicks was brought in to re-examine the contents of the man's pockets. He looked closely at the trousers the man had been wearing. Deep inside the waistband, In a tiny, concealed fob pocket that had been previously overlooked, he found a tightly rolled piece of paper. It was a scrap torn from the page of a book. On it, printed in a distinctive font, were two words, Tamam Shud. Police sought experts to translate the phrase. They were told it was Persian. It meant, "It is ended," or "the end." It is the final phrase found on the very last page of a book of poetry called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The book deals with themes of living life to the fullest, because death is inevitable and there is no afterlife. It was a poetic suicide note, or perhaps a message of finality. The hunt was now on for the book from which the scrap had been torn. Police released images of the scrap to the newspapers. A man came forward. He told police that on November 30th, the day before the body was found, he had parked his car near Somerton Beach. When he returned to his vehicle, he found a copy of the Rubaiyat tossed into the back seat through an open window. He had thought nothing of it until he saw the news. The book was a rare first edition, published by Whitcomb and Tombs in New Zealand. The last page was missing. The scrap found in the dead man's pocket matched the tear perfectly. The paper texture and the font were identical. But the book held even more secrets. On the back cover, visible only under ultraviolet light, were faint pencil markings. There was a phone number and a series of letters that looked like a code. The letters were arranged in 5 lines: WRGOABABDMLIAOIWTBIMPANETPMLIABOAIIQCITTMTSAMSTGAB. For decades, cryptographers, intelligence agencies, and amateur sleuths have tried to crack this code. Is it a one-time pad cipher used by spies? Is it a mnemonic device where each letter stands for the first word of a sentence? For example, WTBIMPANETP could stand for will to be interpreted, must please, and not expect to please. To this day, the code remains technically unsolved. A jumble of letters that might hold the key to the man's mission or his despair. The phone number, however, led to a tangible person. It belonged to a young nurse named Jessica Thompson, who lived on Mosley Street in Glenelg, just a short walk, about 400 meters, from where the body was found. When police interviewed Jessica, she was visibly shaken. She admitted she owned a copy of the Rubaiyat. She said she had given it to an army lieutenant named Alfred Boxall in Sydney in 1945. Police assumed the dead man was Boxall, but they found Alfred Boxall alive and well, still in possession of the book Jessica had given him. The Tamam Shud page in his copy was intact. So the dead man had a different copy of the same rare book, and he had Jessica's phone number. When investigators showed Jessica the plaster cast bust made of the dead man's face, her reaction was telling. She looked at it and appeared about to faint. She looked down and refused to look at the face again. She denied knowing him, but her behavior suggested a deep, terrifying recognition. She was evasive. She asked that her name be kept out of the papers because she was now married and didn't want a scandal. The police, perhaps too gentlemanly for their own good, agreed. She was referred to in the files only as Jestyn. For years, the Jestyn connection fueled the theory that the Somerton Man was a former lover, perhaps the father of her child. Her son, Robin, was born in 1947. As Robin grew up, he displayed rare genetic traits that he shared with the Somerton Man. Both had hypodontia, the missing incisors, a genetic quirk found in only 2% of the population. Both had an even rarer ear shape, where the upper hollow, the Simba, is larger than the lower hollow. The odds of two unrelated men sharing both these traits are astronomical. Many believed Robin was the Somerton Man's son, and the man had come to Adelaide to see them, only to be rejected and take his own life, or be removed to protect a secret. The spy theory also held weight. Jessica Thompson spoke multiple languages and had not been forthcoming about her past. The presence of the code, the proximity to the Woomera missile range, the unidentifiable poison, and the removal of clothing labels all pointed to tradecraft. Was the Somerton Man a Soviet agent? Or perhaps an American looking into leaks? The years turned into decades. The case became a legend in Australia. The Somerton Man was buried in a concrete-lined grave to prevent tampering. Flowers were occasionally left, but no family ever visited. The mystery seemed destined to remain unsolved, a frozen tableau of a man, a beach, and a code. However, the march of technology would eventually catch up with the ghosts of 1948. Enter Professor Derek Abbott of the University of Adelaide. For years, Abbott became the torchbearer of the investigation. He married Rachel Egan, the daughter of Robin Thompson, making him the potential grandson-in-law of the Somerton Man. Abbott was relentless. He believed that modern DNA science could solve what detective work could not. After years of legal wrangling with the South Australian government, approval was finally granted to exhume the body in May 2021. The process was slow and respectful. The grave was opened and the skeletal remains were recovered. The hope was to extract DNA, but bone degradation after 70 years in the soil is a significant hurdle. At the same time, Abbott and American genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick were working with a different sample, hairs that had been trapped in the plaster cast made of the man's face back in 1949. Using cutting-edge forensic genealogy, they built a family tree. They looked for people with the surname Keane. They looked for missing branches. They looked for the genetic markers. And then, in July 2022, they found him. The Somerton Man was not a Russian spy. He was not a ballet dancer. He was not Alfred Boxall. His name was Carl Webb. Carl Charles Webb was born in 1905 in Footscray, Victoria. He was the youngest of 6 siblings. So, who was Carl Webb, and how did he end up dead on a beach in Adelaide? The profile of Carl Webb fits the physical evidence in ways that are startlingly precise. We learned that Carl was an electrical engineer and an instrument maker. This explains the tools in the suitcase, the stenciling brush, the filed-down knife, the screwdrivers. These were the tools of his trade. The stenciling brush was likely used for marking instruments or panels. We learned that Carl Webb loved poetry. He was known to recite it, and he was fond of the very themes found in the Rubaiyat, the fleeting nature of life and the finality of death. This makes his possession of the book less of a spy code and more of a personal artifact, a comfort in dark times. We also learned about the Keane connection. It wasn't his name, but it was a name he had access to. Carl's brother-in-law was named Thomas Keane. It is highly probable that the clothes in the suitcase were hand-me-downs or items he had acquired from his sister's husband. The mystery of the Keane labels was solved. It was simply a matter of a man wearing borrowed clothes. But the most tragic part of the revelation is the motive. Why was he in Adelaide? Carl Webb was married to a woman named Dorothy Robertson, known as Doff. Their marriage was volatile. Carl was described as a moody, somewhat depressive man. In 1947, Dorothy left him. She fled their home in Melbourne and and moved to South Australia to escape the marriage. Records show that Carl Webb had been looking for her. He had come to Adelaide not on a mission of espionage, but on a mission of domestic desperation. He was likely tracking her down, trying to find where she had gone. This explains the one-way ticket. It explains the lack of luggage for a long stay. He was a man on a singular quest. However, even with his identity reclaimed, the darkness around his death remains. We know who he is, but we still do not know exactly how or why he died in that specific spot. Did he find Dorothy? There is no evidence he made contact. Did he go to Somerton Beach to meet Jessica Thompson? The nurse, Jestyn, remains a puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit the Carl Webb picture. Did they know each other? Did he seek her out for help? Or was their connection a coincidence of geography? The fact that he had her phone number is the one thread that still pulls tight. It is possible he knew her from a previous time, or perhaps she was a friend of his wife, a contact point he was trying to leverage to find Dorothy. The fear Jessica showed when seeing the bust might not have been the fear of a spy losing a handler, but the fear of a woman who realizes a violent, estranged husband has tracked down her circle of friends. And then there is the code. If Carl Webb was an electrical engineer and instrument maker, was the code a technical schematic? A list of parts? Or was it merely the ramblings of a man whose mind was deteriorating under the weight of depression and rejection? The letters WRGOAB and so on have not yielded a clear sentence, even with his name known. Some suggest it could be related to horse racing, a common pastime, but no betting slips matched. The cause of death also remains officially undetermined, despite the strong circumstantial evidence of poisoning. If he committed suicide, he did so in a way that was calculated to leave no trace, a final act of an engineer erasing his own existence. He removed his labels, he carried no ID. He walked to a quiet spot by the sea, and he let the Tamam Shud, the end, wash over him. The identification of Carl Webb brings a sense of closure to a man who was nameless for 74 years. It returns him to his family, to his history. We now know he was a brother, a husband, a skilled worker who lived through the Depression and the war. He wasn't a ghost, he was a human being who suffered. But true crime is rarely a clean equation. The solution to the who has only highlighted the complexity of the why. We have stripped away the spy thriller fantasy to reveal a tragedy that is perhaps even more haunting because it is so relatable. A broken marriage, a lonely journey, and a quiet death far from home. The Somerton Man, Carl Webb, rests now with a name. But the image of him lying against that seawall, the unsmoked cigarette on his collar, the Persian poetry in his pocket, and the secret code on the book, these elements ensure that the Tamam Shud case will never truly be finished. It will always be a story about the secrets we keep, the identities we construct, and the silent, invisible battles fought in the human heart. As we close the file on this chapter of the investigation, we are left to wonder, what were his final thoughts as he watched the sun rise over the ocean? Was it regret? Was it peace? Or was it simply the acceptance that, finally, it was ended? This has been a deep dive by DCF Investigations. We have traversed the decades, sifted through the forensic ashes, and finally named the man in the suit. But does the identification of Carl Webb satisfy you? Or do you believe the connection to the nurse and the code points to something more than just a domestic tragedy? I want to hear your theories. Is the spy angle truly dead? Or was Carl Webb a man with a double life? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. The discussion is far from over. Until next time, stay observant, stay curious, and remember, everyone has a story, even those who try to erase it.